Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 31 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. This we're talking with DB Sweeney, the star of memorable films like The Cutting Edge, 8 Men Out, and Lonesome Dove. He's also one of the most down-to-earth celebrities I've ever interviewed, a really good guy. But before our chat, I wanted to open up a little bit about the learning curve behind the HiT cast. Since I started podcasting a few months ago, I've become all too aware of my breathing and my ums and my ahs and other things that I never really gave much thought to before. Now I do. So to fight back, I did a little Googling and found some vocal exercises recommended by NPR. Yes, that NPR. So if you're thinking about starting your own podcast or you just want to maybe build a stronger voice, here's a few tips from our government-funded media. First, pant rapidly like a yappy dog. That's one trick. Then you do a slower pant, kind of like a mid-sized dog might do. Finally, extend your finger about a foot away from your face, and then blow 5 times toward it in short bursts of similar length. And there you go. I've been doing it. Now you can too, and you'll be one step closer to a podcasting career. And for me, well, I've got something to do now when I'm stuck in traffic. In other news, maybe a little bit more important news, I can't stop thinking about Dream Machine, and I didn't really know anything about this band before a few days ago. Their band drips with 70s nostalgia. You got to check out their videos. Very, very eclectic, very based in the 70s. You just won't believe how kind of cool their look is and how retro it is. They really commit completely to that 70s vibe. But that's not why they're worth talking about. They were recently dropped by their label. Why? Well, they gave an interview to an obscure publication where they talked about supporting immigration control and mocking modern feminists and safe spaces. That was it. And now they're gone. Now, this is a private label. They can do what they want, but I can't help but think this is a chilling situation where someone gives views that are echoed by roughly half the country, and now they're looking for a new job. So when I heard about that, I reached out to the band via their website, and they responded pretty quickly. So I did an email interview, and you can find it at hollywoodintoto.com. Just put a search Dream Machine in the search engine. It'll come up right away. I really recommend you check it out. But just for a long story short comparison, they called out the media for its liberal groupthink. They slammed the label in question for its lack of ideological diversity. And they said their dismissal is another chilling sign of free speech suppression. We're seeing that a lot in college campuses across the country. And they're right. Expect more of this soon, by the way. This is not going to be an isolated incident. I think this is going to be more and more common as the weeks and months progress, unless some powerful voices rise up and reclaim free speech in Western culture. And yes, I'm looking at you, Hollywood, and your silence remains deafening. It's getting scary out there, folks, really.
You're listening to my daddy's podcast. He thinks blueberry muffins are a fruit.
Thanks, Eli. This week's HiT tip of the week is No Escape. I saw this movie about 2 years ago in theaters. It kind of caught me flat-footed. A family in peril movie with Owen Wilson as the star. He's no action hero, is he? How did this one not go straight to video? But boy, was I wrong. This film is terrific, filled with tension and relatable characters. And you know, both Wilson and his co-star Lake Bell really are different kind of action hero. They're a mom and a dad just trying to protect their kids, and that makes the stakes really high. You know, some PC critics found the storyline problematic, to use a popular and unfortunate phrase, in a way similar to that movie Snatch from a couple weeks ago with Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn. I guess the people who were the bad guys were the wrong color. Well, ignore that. And please forgive Pierce Brosnan's role in here. Not the best performance of his career. Kind of silly at times too, but you know what? This is a really fun, action-packed movie with lots of danger and lots of suspense. I highly recommend it, and the best part is, it just got added to the Netflix lineup, so check it out.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
Let's get to this week's interview. A knee injury ended DB Sweeney's baseball career before it even started, but it's a good thing he had a plan B, acting. He got a huge break starring in Francis Ford Coppola's Gardens of Stone, and he was just warming up. He started one memorable movie after another, including Memphis Belle, Fire in the Sky, and of course his toe-pick classic, The Cutting Edge. He most recently starred in the faith-friendly drama The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, but he also spends a lot of time supporting the men and women of the U.S. military, and that includes an appearance at this summer at the Warrior Games in Chicago, his new hometown. Here's my chat with DB Sweeney. All right, well, thank you, DB, for joining the show. First of all, I know that you had wanted to be a baseball player as a young man, and you had a knee injury that really derailed those plans. Can you take us back to that time? Because obviously the plan B worked out pretty well with acting. Did you always have acting in the back of your mind as something you wanted to do, or was that sort of a real kind of sea change for you as far as your career?
Acting came out of left field for me. I did a couple plays in high school, the kind of thing you do in senior year, just kill time before you get on with your life. And when I got hurt in college playing baseball, I never really gave a thought to acting. I thought I'd go to law school or be a chef. I'd cooked in a bunch of restaurants, so I really enrolled at NYU just to kind of pass time while I healed my knee. And the knee never really got better. I started doing plays. I started really liking it. And even at that point, I never thought I'd get into Hollywood. I figured I'd do a couple plays, maybe get to Broadway, and then teach acting at SUNY New Paltz or something, upstate New York. Or I didn't really have any eyes on the horizon. I didn't think that horizon was available to me.
Gotcha. Was there a particular point in your early acting days where you thought either A, I like this a lot, or even B, maybe you got some feedback from a fellow actor or a teacher? They said, hey, you're good. You're not just another person sort of, taking up space. You've got some chops here.
Well, even in my senior year of high school, I had this teacher, Jeff Bennett, who was really very supportive of me and very, very much encouraging me. But I didn't really read much into it. I just thought he was a teacher that, liked one of the kids, or he just was a good teacher. And I just didn't really think it was like career guidance that, you're pretty good at this. I thought it was just a guy being supportive. And when I went to NYU, by my third year there, I had gotten myself an audition to replace a guy in a Broadway show called The Caine Mutiny Court Martial, and I got the part. I beat out about 13 or 14 guys. It wasn't really open to the public. It was one of those things you had to hear about to get the audition, and I heard about it. And I was doing the play. I only had one line, and Joe Namath came into the play. It was at the end of a run of a long Broadway run, so people start jumping ship trying to find their next job. And Joe Namath replaced Jamie Widows, and became the defendant in the play, and it was his Broadway debut. And I just remember one night after the show, Joe would hang around like he's an athlete, so he'd hang around in the locker room and want to spend a little time after the game, which is very much of that world. Theater actors can't. The curtain comes down, they try to beat the audience to their cars. I mean, they just want to get out of there. And so Joe and I would sit around, and I'd be sitting in Joe Namath's dressing room, having a beer and talking sports with Joe Namath, and then to walk out into the great lights of Broadway and think, this is unbelievable. If I never do anything else again, this is the greatest thing in my life.
And you're a New Yorker, so that was extra special for you too. So
yeah, that was huge. And I'm of an age where Joe Namath is, he was bigger than Tom Brady in a sense, which is kind of a strange thing to say with Brady with his 5 Super Bowls and everything. But Joe Namath was the center of the sports world there for about 2 or 3 years, where he was the guy. And of course, this is many years later, but still, as a young boy, I remember that moment where I'm doing a play with Mickey Mantle here.
Now, was that the play that Francis Ford Coppola discovered you and put you in Gardens of Stone? Was it that performance, or was it another production?
No, actually, I owe that to Fred Roos, who was the great casting director. Who he now works with Sofia Coppola. He's in his 80s. He's still a very vibrant guy, and he saw me on an audition for a movie. I don't even remember the name of it, where I was auditioning to play the part of a baseball player. And the woman who was directing the movie just didn't get it. She didn't like me. And Fred was so upset that she didn't use me for this 3-scene part that I think he made it his personal mission to launch me and prove her wrong. And he brought me in front of Francis. And I just auditioned several times and got the role in Gardens of Stone.
Now, you're a young actor. It wasn't your passion since the age of 2. By the same token, did you realize just what a break that was when Coppola came to you and when you were able to kind of connect with him for that role?
Yeah, at that time, it wasn't like a long struggle or anything like that. I guess I had been trying to be an actor for about 5 years at that point, and I had done over 30 plays, and I'd done a few little TV commercials, and I had done a bit part in a movie. Sidney Lumet had hired me and given me one line. So I'd had, I was getting some indications that, you might have a future in this, but certainly when Francis hired me and gave me that leading role, it changed everything. Before the movie was even released, people were sending me scripts and asking me to do their movie sight unseen.
Wow. Now, you've worked steadily ever since. I mean, Memphis Belle and The Cutting Edge and Lonesome Dove. You can go on and on. I'm kind of curious, as someone working today and as someone who has been working for the last 3 decades, what's different about the Hollywood experience for an actor like yourself? I mean, we think of it as like, oh, there's so many new channels and there's great stuff on sci-fi. I mean, everywhere you go, there's great content, movies, independent films, streaming. Are you finding it's easier to find roles, or is it tougher? What's changed since those early days?
Well, when I started out, I was always a movie buff, even before I decided I wanted to be an actor, and I saw every movie that I could see. I remember there were times in New York City where I would go at 12 o'clock to the Lowe's in Times Square. I'd buy one ticket and watch the 12 o'clock show, and then when it was over, I'd go to the bathroom. I'd sneak into the 2:30 show of something else, and then I'd sneak into the 4th. I'd stay there for 12 hours and watch 6 movies, and in those days, 2 or 3 of them were worth seeing. Nowadays, I mean, it's the rare multiplex movie that's really even worth your time. I think that for many, many reasons, movies are in decline, which is sad. But I guess at the same time, you have all these great TV shows that are coming along. But I'm of mixed feelings about that, because I feel like the purest form is the movie, because you're forced to write an ending. And TV shows, the mantra that they give all these writers is keep it open ended. Build new streams of story. And while it's interesting for actors, and I guess it's interesting for audiences too, like Breaking Bad, and there's been some other shows that have just been absolute phenomenons based on a performance. And so that's great news for actors in one way, but in the other way, nobody's doing Casablanca, and nobody will ever do Casablanca in particular again. But the discipline to tell that story and to bring all those characters together in a confined space, and with a little nod to Aristotle, make sure that the whole thing ends and it has a certain unity to it. Those movies aren't being made. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw it. I hear a movie's great, like Hell or High Water, and I thought that movie was mediocre. And most of the time now, a movie that's called great, whether it's Moonlight, whether it's La La Land, these movies are thoroughly mediocre compared to anything that was made even 25 years ago.
It's funny. It's a great point you mentioned about the ending. And even today's TV shows, they don't even end when they end. I mean, look at The Sopranos, one of the classic non-ending endings. So that's an interesting perspective. And I think movies today, even when they end, they don't do it well. So I think sticking the landing is kind of tough. I was kind of curious, for being famous for as long as you have, is your relationship with the fans different now? I mean, you've got social media, you've got online kind of content and outlets that are kind of sharing interviews and things. Do you find that when you connect with a fan, is it the same kind of experience, or is it a little bit different than it once was?
I haven't figured out all the social media stuff now. I'm trying to. I've been encouraged to by my agents, and when I directed my movie 2 Tickets to Paradise a few years ago, they said, you got to get involved. This is a new world. I'm not entirely convinced that it translates. In other words, Kim Kardashian has whatever gazillion amount of followers, but nobody's ever going to buy a movie ticket. They're just following her for the train wreck, or to feel superior, or I'm sure for many people to get fashion tips and to worship her as a big international superstar. But I just don't think, the movie studios now and TV networks are increasingly manned by people who came of age in this social media era, and they believe in it. So certainly for getting hired, it's important. Mm-hmm. But I really don't think it translates. I really don't think, I don't think it certainly doesn't translate for the opening weekend of a movie, and it definitely, and I don't think it translates for TV shows either, because the people like my son, who's 15 years old, who's all about Snapchat and he's all about, the quick interaction on his devices, he's not engaging as a customer.
Interesting. You've worked with a lot of great directors over the years. I was kind of curious. You worked twice with Spike Lee, most recently with Chirac. What can you tell us about him as far as his technique, his approach on the set, the way he communicates with actors? Just to watch him and to hear him, he just seems like an interesting fellow. And I was just kind of curious, as an actor working with him, what did you kind of take away from that?
Well, in so many ways, Spike and I could not be more different. But in one fundamental way, we are joined at the hip, and we're both massive New York sports fans. And we originally met at Madison Square Garden. And we met at a time in the late 80s when I was just starting to pop a little bit and he was starting to pop a little bit. And we both had seats in the sort of the middle range of Madison Square Garden, and we were paying for them ourselves. And the biggest difference now is that his seats have migrated down right next to the players, and mine have stayed where they are, gone up. So, but no, Spike. So we knew each other for many years, and I actually bumped into him one time at Fenway Park, a Yankees Red Sox series. We both had, whatever the version of a backstage pass was that we had gotten from the team, and I met him down in the catacombs of Fenway Park. We were both poking around to see where this pass could exactly get us, and we each thought the other guy was the security guard coming to kick us out. So, so it was kind of a funny memory. And Spike has hired me a couple times, and I think he's going to hire me again. And we understand each other, and he wants me to arrive with something he can film, and it's a really good lesson, I think, for young actors. You don't have to have decided it's the only way to do it, but you got to show up with something. You have to. It's not just learning your lines. You got to show up with something that has a point of view, and a lot of times in Spike's movies, because a lot of his movies are about race. I mean, almost all of his movies are about race. I'm the white guy, so I'm either the evil white guy or I'm the dumb white guy. And I always prefer to be the dumb white guy because then it's funny.
Gotcha. Just a quick note. I'm a Yankee fan, and I remember going to my first time at Fenway Park, and I wanted to hate the experience so much, and I loved it. It's the most amazing, magical park, so I can appreciate going to the catacombs. Must have been kind of special for you. It
was great. And, living in Chicago now, and I was along for that, I'm more of a White Sox fan because of 8 Men Out, but being along for that Cubs ride just because it was so important to this city. People say Wrigley Field is the best park, and it's not. It's Fenway, even though Wrigley's tremendous and has its own charms.
Gotcha. You mentioned 2 Tickets to Paradise, your directorial debut from a couple years ago. Got good reception. I enjoyed it. I was kind of curious, what did you take away from that experience? I know you were sort of an accidental director because it wasn't your initial plan, but it did happen that way. But do you kind of walk away thinking, I want to do this again? Do you have any sort of screenplay projects you'd like to tackle? What's sort of the takeaway from that?
Well, yes, I have a couple things that I'll mention in a minute, but the first part of it was that the experience for me, I'm extremely proud of the movie, and there are some very hard-won lessons there. I put up a big part of the money for the movie and didn't get it back, and I did more jobs than I would have liked to do, from producing to directing to. I was the de facto production designer, I was the casting director, I did the costumes, and that's not usually done on a $2 million movie, so it was way too much work for me to really enjoy most of it. But there were moments on the movie where I had such a good time, and where, like for example, Wayne Gretzky was there because Janet Gretzky was, playing John McGinley's wife. And Wayne was there for the entire time Janet was there. And we had one scene we shot at Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego where, we're trying to make it look like we have a ton of extras. Of course, we have no budget, so we have about 50 extras, but I had a relationship with Coors Light, so I had 50 extras and 500 cases of Coors Light. My brother-in-law, he sells materials to colleges for their bookstores, like T-shirts and stuff. He made me up 1,000 T-shirts for Marshall, the one team I had in the fictional football game, and the University of Texas, the other team. So we had 2,000 T-shirts, 500 cases of beer. And then Wayne Gretzky, he was late coming back from a golf thing with Janet, so he cost us an hour and a half or so he wanted to make it up to me. So as people were walking into the University of the UC San Diego game versus UCLA, which is purple and light blue team colors, we needed people in green and burnt orange. Gretzky would stand there with a T-shirt in one hand and a Coors Light in the other hand and say, "Hey, if you put this T-shirt on, let's hang out and have a beer." and Gretzky stood there and recruited over 100 people, and then in the movie it looks like we have a real tailgating scene.
That's a great story. One of the things you've been doing along with acting all these years is doing voiceover work. And I think when people hear, oh, he's a voiceover actor, it's like, oh, that's the easiest job in the world. You show up, you record a few lines, you go home, don't have to shave. Talk a little bit about that. Was it an easy transition for you to make that kind of work? And what's the more challenging aspect of it that people don't realize?
Well, it's, I guess it's, when you watch like Mick Jagger or Bono or somebody, that they're the best in the business at being rock singers or iconic rock singers. And it looks much easier than, say, what The Edge or Keith Richards are doing, and they'll just stand up there and howl. But there's obviously talent involved. And then there's all these mic techniques and there's all these vocal techniques that you learn that are hard to put your finger on. And I don't know them for singing, but being a voiceover artist, which, first of all, flag on the play. Anytime artist is in your title, you're full of shit. So, artist in residence or makeup artist is my favorite when I go on the set. Now, why are you a makeup artist, but the lighting guy is a lighting guy? Like, how did that happen? But I consider myself a voice actor, and I've learned these techniques over the years. The first job I ever had in voice acting was I did a commercial for the Army where I was on camera, and it was a very big job for me. I made a bunch of money, and it was a scene with Bruce Kirby, who was Bruno Kirby's dad. Great man, great Broadway actor, and he played my dad, and we did this tender little scene, and it ran for a year and a half, and I got all these auditions out of it and made a boatload of money. So to say thank you, the Army's ad agency, which was NWA at that point, called me up and said, hey, we've got this other Army commercial. We don't need you to be on camera, but we need to replace one line. There's a guy in a submarine or a guy in a tank who misses up his line, and we want to have you replace his line. So I replaced the line, and that commercial ran for a year and a half, and I made $60,000 or something. So I was like, wow, this is a cool deal. So I started to investigate it, and over the years, it's really become a great thing. I at one point I was the voice of Lincoln cars, and they give you a free car to drive around while you're the voice of the car, and you make this money. And so it was a great way to keep the lights on in between finding a good script. And now sometimes I almost enjoy it more, like when I'm narrating Mountain Men for the History Channel. It's a character. I mean, I sort of act like I'm the fifth Mountain Man, and I try to. So it's become acting, and then promo is a very different thing. But I think it's great if you're starting out as an actor. You got to find other ways to keep money coming in, because even, unless you're Tom Cruise or The Rock or at the very pinnacle of the business, there are lulls and your bills don't go away.
Gotcha. You've been active for your support of the military over the years, and now you're working out with the Warrior Games in Chicago, your new hometown. The games go through July 8th. And for people who don't know it, it's wounded warriors basically competing in different events. It just sounds like a magical thing. Talk about your involvement with the games and what you'll be doing.
Yeah, the games move around. They were in D.C. They've been, a couple other places. And I'm a celebrity ambassador, which means I'm basically just trying to shine a light on it, get people interested, get people excited about coming out to see it. The opening ceremonies are July 1st at Soldier Field, and Blake Shelton is playing. So, even if you're not that interested in watching the Warriors and you want to come out and support, Blake Shelton and Jon Stewart's the host of it, so it's a really big deal at Soldier Field. And with the Bears playing at Soldier Field, this might be the only chance you have this year to have a win by going to to Soldier Field. So it's really going to be like a fun event. And then all over Chicago, there's swimming, there's floor volleyball, and it's just so inspirational to see people who have, first of all, have done so much for the country and sacrificed and have these injuries. And then this whole process of competing is allowing them to sort of move past, the limitations of their injuries, and just find joy again in competition. So I really just advise anybody who can get to Chicago to any of the events. It goes from June 30th to July 8th, and just come on down and go on the website dodwarriorgames.com and or just Google Warrior Games Chicago, and just check it out. It's really a cool thing, and I've gotten so much out of it. I get so inspired by the athletes.
That sounds like a great story. And we'll have all the information about this and about your other projects at hollywoodintoto.com/DB-Sweeney. So all the show notes will be there. And also, before we had this conversation, you mentioned you're going to be playing a crooning psycho. I think that was your term in an upcoming movie. Talk about that and also some other roles you got coming up soon.
Yeah, this is a big movie called Captive State with John Goodman and Vera Farmiga and Machine Gun Kelly. And it's a cool movie where it's 9 years after an alien occupation of Earth. And I'm not supposed to say too much except for the fact that I'm kind of collaborating with the aliens. So I'm a little bit of like an evil, like a Stasi policeman. Mm-hmm. Who's, it's a very much a totalitarian society now where there are no individual rights, and the aliens are trying to wipe out any memory of our civilization. So it's kind of interesting. Like the contraband is digital materials, music, songs, movies, and stuff. And so that's the stuff that is being shared on the black market, and the aliens are trying to collect it all.
Interesting. I think you're another evil white guy there. Talk about Haymaker. I think you mentioned that's sort of a labor of love project from someone you've kind of met recently.
Yeah, I met this guy, Nick Sasso, who was an MMA. He's an amateur MMA fighter, but he's a visual effects artist. And he met this transgender singer, a real person named Nomi Ruiz, and he had this strange reaction. It wasn't like a romantic attraction or anything like that, but he had a fascination with Nomi. And so he wrote this movie about an MMA fighter who meets this, and Nomi Ruiz is a singer. She's a nightclub performer. She'll go over to Greece or in Brooklyn or someplace where there'll be 1,000 people that come out to her shows. So Nick wrote this script where I play his older brother, And it's a very interesting script because it doesn't go where you think it's going to go. And so anyway, it's one of those ones where it's a very small movie. We've already filmed in Greece, in Los Angeles. Nick went over to Thailand. This is a micro-budget movie. And right now he's raising more money so that we can go finish the movie in New York with this climactic fight sequence. And it's just kind of cool. It's a very pure movie in the sense that Nick wrote it. He's playing the part. He's directing it. And, I'm in his corner, and literally in the movie and also in the process of making the movie, and I'm rooting for the guy.
Excellent. Well, again, I appreciate your time, DB. Before we let you go, we always ask guests of the HitCast, what are you watching these days? What are you reading? What's on your iPod? Give us some kind of content recommendations, something that maybe people might not be aware of, or just things that you can't stop watching.
Well, I mentioned earlier I have a 15-year-old son, and I got him a guitar for Christmas. He's a hockey player, but so I wasn't worried about him turning into a stoner immediately. So I thought it was a safe play. And anyway, I've been so gratified that his taste is all classic rock. So when I come home at night, he's trying to play Pink Floyd licks on his guitar or Lynyrd Skynyrd. And so I feel like it's a real validation of being a good parent that all the road trips we went on, I taught him a little bit about, the great music that they don't make anymore. So with that said, like my recent music, and this is kind of laughable, is White. I've been so into White Stripes lately. I mean, I've always liked it, but I'm just playing that sort of on a nonstop loop. I have really no recommendations for new music because I'm sure I'd get laughed out of your podverse. But as far as on TV, I tried that Stranger Things because everybody told me it was terrific. I'm not really biting on it, but I got into the last few days the People versus O.J. Simpson because I was watching my friend Cuba Gooding Jr., who we play hockey together, and I know a lot of the other actors in there as well. And it is strangely compelling. Like there's nothing new in there, but it is a moment in time. And I mentioned the Stranger Things connection because I know a lot of people say it's got this nostalgia value and it's got all these 80s references, which to me they're a little ham-handed. But the O.J. Simpson thing, that story vehicle is really captures the 1990s and the beginning of this media era that we're sort of in full flower now. So not media era, the nonstop media era. The social media
I agree.
Era. So that was really I hadn't really thought about how much that moment was sort of a turning point in the explosion of it, and I think they're a little over the Kim Kardashian is a 9-year-old, and they're a little they underline it a little too much at times. It was right there without doing that, but it really is good. Like Cuba is really worth the price of admission. Travolta is just he's a carnival sideshow train wreck, and he's worth watching as well for different reasons. But Cuba Gooding Jr., Bruce Greenwood, there's just some really, really strong. He plays Gil Garcetti, and there's just some really good performances in there, and some really, really bad ones. So it's a kind of interesting in the sense of what's going to happen in this scene, in the sense of which actor is going to be good and which one's going to be unwatchable.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you, DB Sweeney, for checking in with the HitCast. People can look forward to seeing Captive State, Haymaker, and maybe another movie with Spike Lee. Of course, you've got other great films in your resume. And I have to say, I watched The Cutting Edge recently. That one holds up beautifully. So if you bemoan the fact they don't make good romantic comedies anymore, romantic films, just go watch that one more time. It'll kind of scratch that itch. And DB, thanks so much. We will check in with you down the road, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. It's always good to talk to you. I appreciate your support.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.